Hi everyone, my name is Miguel Marenco, and today I am going to be discussing an article written by Richard Jackson, and it is known as An Argument for Terrorism. Okay, so right off the bat, Richard Jackson believes that it is cliche and that it is absurd that terrorism has over 200 definitions for the term of terrorism. Uh, he believes that affects the way we understand terrorism and how the criminal justice system deals with the criminal acts internationally and domestically. So there's 3 points that he gave throughout this article. His first point is to explain that there is many challenges in defining terrorism. His second point is to introduce a set of criteria to distinguish terrorism from other forms of violence. And his third and last point is to demonstrate how his approach can strengthen counterterrorism and norms against forms of political violence. So going back to his first point, which is to explain that there is many challenges in defining terrorism. As I mentioned before, he believes it is absurd that there is over 200 definitions in just for terrorism. So that alone proves and shows that there's so much contradiction, there's so much confusion how just to define terrorism. And one of those reasons is that many terrorism scholars come with many different perspectives, come from many backgrounds and cultures. So terrorism is also known as or considered as an ideology, movement, political or religious violences. Political violences for political and religious gains, and violences against non-militant and civilian groups. However, with that just alone, there can be many questions, many speculations can be brought up by just those examples of terrorism. For example, violence against non-militant civilian groups that can mean anything. For example, recently, unfortunately, in America, we've been seeing a lot more mass shootings, especially in schools. That can be also known as an act of terror. So that's why these definitions should be retained, and they should be a little bit more precise, because that can mean anything. And that's one of the reasons why he believes that a universal definition for terrorism should be made. Now, going to his second point, the author, Richard Jackson, believes that we should have a consistent definition for legitimate terrorism. So going back to what I just finished saying, the term can be used as a function to restrict and eliminate the use of oppressive forms of political violence. So he used 4 basic characteristics for this universal definition for terrorism. His first basic characteristic is terrorism is an intentional, predetermined strategy of political violence. So terrorist groups or any other non- or state group can plan or have a strategy to cause terror to its audience. The second basic characteristic is the targets of terrorist violences are not the victims but the audiences. And the third, so for example, back to 9/11. Yes, unfortunately, thousands of Americans died because of the terrorist acts of Al Qaeda. However, the audience was America. The third basic characteristics is terrorism is intended to cause fear and to intimidate. So going back to what I just finished saying, my example. So unfortunately, on 9/11, thousands of Americans died because of the terrorist acts. But the main goal, the main reason behind why they conducted this terrorist attack was to cause fear, to cause intimidation on us as Americans. So if they can their goal was to just cause fear on us. So their goal was not necessarily to kill thousands of Americans. However, they did, but their main goal was to cause fear on us. And then the fourth basic characteristic is terrorism is to aim primarily but not solely on civilians. So those are 4 basic characteristics that he looked to define terrorism universally. And then his third and last point would be, by following these four basic characteristics, Richard believes that the term could help advance a progressive political project which protects vulnerable people. He believes that this approach would hold states and non-states accountable, non-states and state groups accountable. Today, terrorism is only considered to be done in the West, but that is false. Terrorism can be done here in America as well. So that's what I took from this article. And thank you.